The Minister departs. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to challenge his counter-motion directly to him. But so first I should thank Sinn Féin for bringing forward this important motion on energy costs. And we're happy to support the measures in it about beefing up this, the CRU to try and address the high cost of energy in this country. But we would go further. We think we need caps, and we brought in a bill at the beginning of this year to bring in energy price caps. And indeed, we would go further than that and say we have to nationalise the energy sector in this country if we're going to actually deal with the fact that we have the highest energy prices in Europe and that people are being ripped off. And it is a direct result of the philosophy that has been pursued by Minister Ryan and by successive governments, and is captured, the essence of the problem is captured in his counter-motion, where he says, accurately, the position of successive governments has been that competitive energy markets result in greater choice for consumers and businesses in terms of suppliers, products and prices. And prices in the electricity and gas retail markets have been fully deregulated since 2011 and 2014 respectively. Absolutely accurate statement of the government's position, and it bears absolutely no relationship to the reality of what's happened since that deregulation. In fact, the exact opposite happened. The exact opposite. I was amusing myself looking at the articles on deregulation in 2011 when it was happening, and the ESB were celebrating, their chief executive was celebrating the deregulation. And he said, "We have waited for this for a long time to happen, and for much of that time the ESB was saying that if the regulator removed its shackles, it would be able to aggressively compete on price." He said the company was being given, quote, the chance to get into the game, and said it would create, quote, a win-win situation for the suppliers and consumers and should drive down prices. Exactly what the Minister has said in this counter-motion, more than, 14 years later, the exact opposite happened. The exact opposite happened. As soon as they deregulated and got into the game and moved the ESB from being a not-for-profit mandate to competing in a for-profit, deregulated market, our prices in electricity went from being the lowest in Europe to the highest in Europe. That's exactly what happened. We have the highest prices in Europe. When the ESB had a not-for-profit mandate, we had the lowest prices in Europe. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work that out. And yet, the government continues with the mantra about competition producing lower prices. I mean, it kind of baffles me, and it's sort of Orwellian, that continues to be the mantra. It's absolutely shocking. And of course, the result is misery for 29% of the population. More than a quarter of the population, according to the ESRI, suffering energy poverty. And most of that is concentrated among people in private rented accommodation and in council houses. Disproportionately, almost double the level of energy poverty if you're a private renter or if you live in a council house. Because they haven't been retrofitted, the proportion of your income that you have to pay on energy more than twice the proportion of income that rich people have to pay. And then the government compounds it by a whole series of regressive taxes, like the carbon tax, like VAT, like excise, all regressive. And again, like, this isn't me saying it, the studies are there. The richest 10% of the population spend 10% of their household's income go on indirect taxes. How much do the poorest 10% of the population pay on indirect taxes? 29%. Coincidentally, the same number who suffer energy poverty. Because, of course, it's one of the biggest outputs, expenditure items for poor people is keeping their houses warm. So the net result of the manner in which the government has done this has compounded the impacts of deregulation and privatisation of the energy market. And of course, the key words to understand what's happened in the last few years since the Ukraine crisis, and of course the Ukraine crisis had an impact. Only a fool would say it didn't have an impact, but only a fool would fail to acknowledge that the energy companies took advantage of it and engaged in absolutely rampant profiteering. Rampant profiteering. Where their profits every single year have gone through the roof on the back of these energy price hikes. And the government wants to compound the situation. Okay, it was forced under pressure to give one-off payments to somewhat mitigate this, but its longer-term policy, stated in this motion, is to remain committed to a competition model which has resulted in prices going steadily up since we deregulated the market, and in regressive taxes that disproportionately hurt the poor. And then if you want to sort of further compound it, we have a grant model for the retrofit of homes which favours the wealthy. Because it is much easier for the wealthy to make up the gap between the grants that are available to retrofit your home if you're in certain income brackets than it is for workers who can't make up that gap. Indeed, one could even argue, to some degree, the retrofits of the very wealthy are being subsidised by the taxes of the very poor. Which is ironic and unacceptable. So we believe that more robust measures need to be taken, that we need to learn the lesson that deregulation of the energy market was an absolute disaster, and that we need to go back to the ESB having a not-for-profit model and imposing caps, energy price caps, which we proposed in a bill this year. Our bill, to be honest, wasn't even particularly radical, was suggesting that we would set the per kilowatt hour price for electricity at 25 cents and gas at 8 cents. Currently, the Bord Gáis are charging 8.94 cents per kilowatt hour, SSE electricity charging 9.61 cent, and Flow Gas are charging 10.18. We also would, and in terms of gas, currently it's 35.83 cents per kilowatt hour. We proposed a cap of 25 cents per kilowatt hour. And by the way, those prices I gave, which are for kind of, fairly standard customers, I have seen kilowatt hour prices for people who are on district heating systems, which are multiples of that. I mean, shocking levels of prices, where people in those usually apartment blocks with other companies, lesser known companies, are being absolutely ripped off, and they haven't even access to competition, so-called competition, because they're tied into a particular system, district heating system, and are getting astronomical bills. Frankly, I don't know how some people even manage to pay them. They are so shockingly high. And then, the human misery that flows from that, particularly for elderly people, people with disabilities, poor, vulnerable people. Sometimes some of the suffering and hardship that results from all this is absolutely shocking. So that is our view. We welcome Sinn Féin's measures. They would certainly be an improvement. We believe we do need to have to go further and go back to a not-for-profit model in terms of the energy sector and cap prices. In the last 18 seconds, I would also say, the Minister is sometimes praised for wanting to develop offshore renewable wind, and of course we should absolutely have that, but it's going to make absolutely no difference to energy prices if it's privatised, and that's the plan. In fact, the French state energy company will own more of the energy produced offshore in this country than we will, and that is a flipping scandal.
Thank you very much.